Hello, YouTubers. This is the third session with my friend Mehdi here, where we continue to show you a real life example of designing and implementing a processing service that produces a higher order business logic. In the last session, we talked a little bit about the happy path, and we said, okay, we want to implement an upsert function, meaning I want to be able to insert a country if the country doesn't exist. If it does exist, then go ahead and update it. And I'm, as usual, joined by my dear friend, my little brother here, Mahdi. How are you doing, brother?
I'm fine. Hello, everyone. Our session today will be we finished the happy path, and today we will continue with the validations in the
Yeah,
upsert, right?
yeah, that's exactly what it is, the validations. Okay, so let's go into where we started.
And Hassan, can you explain a little bit for us about what we have to validate here?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
we are
yeah.
not in the foundation level anymore.
Right, right. So okay, so that's exactly what it is. So for processing services and upwards, right? You have all these kinds of categories of of services. Let me just go back here into the focused mode and talk a little bit about this. Like when people talk about, separation of concern, they don't talk. There's two types of concerns that you need to be aware of. There's categorical concern, and there is the functional concern. These two are very different things. Like when you go and say, I want to be able to add, I want to be able to remove, I want to be able to update, right? That's called functional concern because it basically targets one particular capability and that's it.
Uh-huh.
But then there's also categorical concern. And this categorical concern is not often talked about, which is where you go and say, what is the level of complexity that the concern of this service is responsible for? Some services play with what I call primitive operations, add, remove, delete, apply a validation, do some processing, and then call the integration point done. But then the higher you go in this architecture, the more complex, your business logic gets. You get into a higher order business logic, advanced business logic, and then uber advanced business logic when you start working with coordination services, uber management services, which is something that it'll take a little bit of time to find a real life example, but I can't produce, content unless it actually is attached to a real life project. So from a categorical standpoint, if you're not on the foundation level, your validation structure changes a little bit. You only validate what you care about. What does that mean? You already have the foundation service making sure that nothing bypasses, that limit, of a foundation service unless you validate everything. If you take a quick look at, the if you take a quick look at the foundation services that you built in here in the country service, when you go here and say validate country on add, and you go inside this guy, you will see that you're validating literally every single property in here. The ID, the name, the ISO 3, continent, everything, right? Everything here is validated. However, in the processing services, it only validates what it needs. So let's talk a little bit about that and let's see what kind of validation levels that we talk about here. So number one, I want to know that the past tense object here is not null. So that's one validation point that I need to care about. And I also, what do I need in here? Okay, so this guy is being used across here. There's only one more thing that I need to validate here, which is the ID. So I validate the country and I validate its ID. Everything else is outside of the concern of this higher order business logic. And it's outside of that concern because it's a responsibility of some other service to make sure that the service is structurally, logically, and from an integration standpoint, externally valid. Does that make sense?
Right?
Okay, let's get started with a little test. Let's go down here. I'm gonna create a quick test. I'm gonna call it, I'm gonna copy the test that you have, but instead of logic, I'm gonna say, so this should be upsert, right? So this is validations and then upsert, right? Because that's the function that you're working with. And this guy should be logic dot upsert, right? Upsert, because
Right.
that's the function. All right, let's go here and then let's do this. Let's write a quick test in here. So fact public public async task should throw, let me zoom in a little bit for people on their phones, validation exception on upsert if, right, if country is null and log it async. Okay, that's one guy. And then let's go here and say given when then. Okay. And then what do we have here? We have a bad, we want to pass in a bad country, right? So this is country, null country like this. That's null, right? So that's the country. And then I want to go here and say null country processing exception. See
Mm-hmm.
that? So null country processing exception. See the category here is embedded in, you know, in the type of the exception that you're throwing, but not necessarily the message, because you don't want to expose your architecture to the outside world. So I'm going to go ahead and say null country processing exception. This guy doesn't take parameters because there's no parameters to pass. The object itself is null. So let's go ahead real quick and create this guy. So let's go here. This is a localized exception, right? So I can go into
Right.
models. I can go into, is this the first model we create for this one? Okay, then we're going to go
Yeah.
under models and say processings, because it's a
Eh,
namespace. And under processings, I'm going to go and say countries, right? Countries, countries. And under countries, I'm going to create another folder that I'm going to call exceptions. Okay, under exceptions, I need two things. I need the null country processing exception. That's this guy, which means this guy is going to inherit from exception, which is our nice library here. And then this guy doesn't take input parameter, but I'm going to go down here and say base and then message. And then I'm just going to say country is null. That's it. Just pure and simple. Doesn't say country processing, doesn't say orchestration, doesn't say anything. The other
right.
thing that I want to throw in here is the country processing validation exception, right? So that's the categorical type of this. So I'm going to go here and say exception like this. And in here, I'm going to take a CTOR. And this country processing validation exception will take what? It will take exception as an inner exception like this. Zoom out a little bit. And then in the base area here, I'm going and saying message, right? And this is country validation error occurred. Please try again, right? This is your guy, again like this. And then underneath that guy, here we go. Underneath that guy, I'm going to pass in inner exception. Here you go. So that's that guy. Let's go back to our test. What do you think? Let's go back to your test here and let's go pull in these references. So that's this guy is like this. I'm gonna go here and say var expected country
Yeah.
processing validation exception, right?
Right.
So that's the categorical. And then I can go here and say country processing validation exception, take in the null country exception, done and done, all good and dandy. There's extra line in here that we don't need here. We got rid of it. Now let's execute that. So value task, right? And here's country, because this guy's gonna return a country anyway, right? Upsert country task like this dot service, processing service, upsert country task async. And then in here, I'm passing in what? The null country, because this guy is invalid. Okay, great. Underneath that guy, I'm gonna go and say await assert throws async. And this guy should be throwing a country processing exception like this. And this is absurd country as task like this. Okay, that's one guy.
Right.
What else? I want to go here and validate. Say logging broker verify. That's my broker. Log error, right? It is, right? Same exception as, because I want to validate my expected exception has happened. So that's times once, right? And then the other thing here is that we want to validate both. None of these other scenarios have happened. So the first scenario here is the country service verify that this service with any service dot select all countries, right? Service dot retrieve all countries, right? Like
Right.
this. This guy have never been called. Oop, never been called. So that's one. That's the story that you're telling through your code. It's going and saying this is my situation. So this is service. Let's try this again. Service and then add country async. It is any country. And
It's
this guy,
also
how many kind?
never.
Never. And then what else? There's one more, right? So also the modify, right? So you're not calling anything either way in this scenario. So this is what modify, right? The rest here is just history. You're going and saying based on my chronological order, I'm going here and saying my country process, my mock country service mock is done and done. Now
Right.
the only thing that we don't have here is the same exception as. Let's go build that guy. Let me minimize, control MO, minimize the world, and then I can go up in here and say private static, right? And this guy returns an expression of a func, right? The expression of a func that takes in, it returns a boolean, but it takes in what? An
Ex
exception,
exception. Yeah.
right? So it takes in an exception, and then this guy says same exception as. Okay, so this guy
Mm.
takes in an exception then as an input parameter, and it returns a comparison between two things, two exceptions. So this guy needs another closing. Is this guy? Okay, return actual exception is my fat arrow, and then actual exception dot message should be equivalent to expected. This guy should be expected. Exception, because it is already implied in the name of it that you're doing comparison. So there's that guy. Okay, that's one. And then actual exception dot inner exception dot message, like this, should be exactly the same as this guy. And then the last one in here
Data
is, yeah, so in here we can go and say actual exception dot inner exception dot data, right,
as
as exception. So this guy like this guy here. Let's wrap this guy like this. Let's go here and say inner exception as exception dot data equals, right, expected exception dot data, right? So that's that guy. So now we're comparing a couple exception. We're just comparing what we care about. Some people have suggested looking into the types. I'm okay with that. You know, I think what really matters to me is that the messages and the data is okay, because that's really what propagates at the end of the day. The type is for us mainly, but it's not a bad idea to entertain. So now you should have a failing test. Let's go and see if our test is failing. Let's go right here and let's run this. Here we go. There we go. We have a failing test. Why is this failing? It's saying we were supposed to fail. You're
hmm
supposed to throw a country validation exception, but it was never thrown. And your unit test should be expressive. Like you should make sure that, yeah, we want to fail, but we want to fail right, right? So you want to have the right failure, right? So I'm going to run a code cleanup here real quick. And then I'm going to give you a failing test as we pairing. So this guy's fail. And then you get to do the pass, my friend. Go for it.
Okay. All right.
Your turn. Have fun.
All right. I will just
Mm,
give me a second.
go for it. No rush.
Share my screen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right.
Let me run all tests and
Have a little party going on for you. Purple and red and orange.
it's
All right, man. Whatever works for you, bro. Whatever
oh
works for you.
yeah. You will not
Say,
get
they say
get
whatever
tired.
floats your boat, you know? Mm,
It's not boring and you will not get tired. And when you're looking for something, I think it's easy to find.
mm, perfect.
Okay, our test. Okay.
All right, Mr. Traits, let's go.
Okay.
You screwed up your Visual Studio configuration with the traits, and now you can't
No,
see the TIFFs. Uh,
it's just like
uh.
this.
Yeah, that's much better. All right, let's go back to normal. All right.
Okay. All right. We are fine.
Yeah, looks like the code went all the way there in Europe. Let's see if we can bring it back green.
Okay. Now I have to create a file. Country processing service validations.
Uh-huh. Yes, sir. You need a new file, right?
New class.
You need two new files, right?
Yeah, and one for the exceptions.
Mm-hmm.
Country processing service
Okay.
dot validation. All right.
All right.
Here is one. Okay. Country service dot exceptions.
Okay.
Okay, and let's make this partial.
Mhm.
Okay. Now we can save uh, public, static, or private.
Right.
Private static void null country.
Uh,
No, invalid country. Or
no, 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 no. Validate. Validate country. Right?
yes, 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 yes.
A little early in the morning today. Okay. Let's do
Okay,
it. Uh,
take a country. Just I don't know why it's one.
we'll don't let it write for you, you know?
Okay.
I know some folks that disable these things. Say don't help me. I want to write the code. Yeah, yeah.
Actually, I was looking for that.
I know some people that be like it. I don't help me. You know, they go and write it on VS Code. So and they try to disable the IntelliSense for C sharp. Like they don't install the extension. Like don't help me. I don't want that. They're very happy, but these are also like really like seasoned engineers. They're more used to just hit the command line and build C++ modules and stuff like that.
Okay. Now we will have another method. Again, private.
Well. So far you don't. You just need to say if null, throw the
Oh,
exception. That's all. Not yet. Your code will evolve eventually. hmm Try is instead of equal equal.
yeah, right. Draw new. Uh, null
Mm,
country. What was the
Processing.
name?
Null country
Null
processing
country processing
exception.
exception. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Mm. Scala might let you get away without the parentheses, but not C sharp.
And one extra line here.
And there's another extra line, line 20. Take that one out. There you go.
Okay. Nice.
My
Let's.
favorite part while reviewing PRs for people. Ah, there's an extra line. I call it my cup of coffee routine. Let's see who missed the extra line. All right.
Okay. Now we will have a public delegate.
Why public? Private, right? Why do you care, right?
delegate, and it will get an
So what does it return? It returns a value task, right? Let's do value task. No, delegate itself doesn't take a generic type. Value
no,
task.
it value task of a country.
Yep.
Okay, and it's complaining. Okay,
Uh-huh.
all right, and the name will be uh
Returning country function.
returning country function. Returning country function. Okay,
Okay.
all right, private static. It will return again a value task of the country,
Mm-hmm.
and we call it try catch.
Yep.
Try catch. Okay, and it will get the returning country function,
Mm-hmm.
and I will call it returning country function.
Right. Some people also argued, using func instead of delegates. It
Yeah,
works.
but I'm actually uh because I think the delegate is like an old way, right? Not old, but I mean,
It could be, you'll see people use it a lot. We will use it a lot in Blazor. You're passing in a delegate, but I think func works as well. I tried it with func. I just tried to come up with the simplest, easiest thing for people to remember. And func seemed to be a little bit a learning curve for some people. So,
oh my God. Okay, then we will
hmm,
return returning country function.
so you probably want to await this because this is a value task. You want to take away static and put async and then return await, right? So why static is not going to work for you? Because your create and log error is going to be talking to an instance.
Right.
Static functions are cheap because they don't wait for an object to be created, right? That's not the case here because you're going to have to talk to the logging broker, which has to have an instance of the class that you're in, right? So just saving you a little bit of time there. Okay, so what exception are we trying to handle here?
Null
Null. Let's do null country processing exception.
exception.
Hmm.
Okay. Null country processing.
Exception. Hmm.
All right. Then we will wrap it in the. We will create a function.
Hmm.
Create throw.
Create and throw validation exceptions, right?
Create and log
Hmm.
validations exception.
Just validation, just one. You're creating one exception, one validation exception. Uh-huh.
Okay. Not this is. Okay. Type will be
Mm.
country validation, country processing validation,
That's
right?
right. That's right. Hmm.
It will get the exception and exception.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And and then we will say country processing validation exception. We call it country processing validation exception is equal. Uh, no, no, yeah, right. New country processing validation exception. It will get an exception,
Hmm.
and then we will log it. This dot logging broker dot log error,
Hmm.
and we will say country processing validation exception,
That's right.
and then we will return that guy.
Yep. Yeah, since the right side is clear on line 35, you don't need to specify the type. On declaration on line 34, so you could
Yeah,
just use var since the right side is clear, right? Right, too many tabs everywhere now. So go back one. That's it. All right, let's go.
and it will get a null country processing.
Uh-huh.
All right, I think we are fine here.
Yeah, now what?
Now we will go to, am I in the right place? Country processing service. Okay, here we will say, let's make this lambda first and remove, we say try catch,
Hmm.
and I will just do this, and it will be the async.
Okay.
Okay, I think
Mm. Why is it mad at you?
what's wrong here?
Let's go back to your, you need an extra squiggly brackets after the fat arrow, the second fat arrow.
Here?
Yeah, put a
Ah,
squiggly bracket.
right, right.
There you go.
Okay.
See, Christmas tree is not letting you have a whole bunch, oh, have a wedding going on in there. This is still not gonna work though, why? Hmm, something is missing.
What is missing?
What
Yeah,
originates?
yeah. Yeah, yeah. We did not validate that.
Yeah, we didn't validate it, right? So let's make the call.
Okay. Validate country,
There
country.
you go. Welcome home, Mehdi. How are you doing? All right, there you go. Good job. See, look at you, you know.
Yeah.
So clear out the extra empty line there and line 33. And the rest of this should be just sweet and dandy. Make a commit, and then let's pick up the rest of this tomorrow. So our
All
next
right.
session, yeah, our next session would be basically validating what? Just the ID, right? That's all we care about. That's the ID. And then after that, we will talk a little bit about a new thing that we haven't really talked to people a lot about, which is picking up the categories from lower stream services. You know, so you're picking up a foundation service exception, like a validation exception. How are you going to deal with that? How are you going to process it? How are you going to let it trickle upstream to other services? What do you think about that? Does that sound like a plan?
I'm waiting for that because I think it,
Huh.
the
So that,
processing service was cool. Everything you have, it's like a new fundamental then for the
yeah.
next level.
I'll wait till you see the orchestrations. Once you figure out the orchestration, the only thing that might be a little bit different. So on the orchestration, some concepts, so you see as you evolve, you're carrying with you things from the foundation service level, and then you add an extra thing. Like for instance, orchestration services are allowed to talk to two or three different entities, right? Processing service can't do that, right? It produces a higher order business logic, single entity higher order business logic, right? But then processing orchestration services where things get really interesting, like you can process queues, you can do a cul-de-sac, like it could go one route, get the message from the queue, and then shoot it right back to another queue or shoot it right back to a storage broker. You could do a combination. So these orchestration services, they don't really do the work, but they delegate the work across multiple entities. And then you get to
Uh-huh.
think about coordination services, management services, Uber management services, and then there's this really tiny, simple service that's called aggregation service. And this is way at the very end of the road when we talk about exposers and why we need to tie up all our services and expose one front when it comes to APIs. So anyway, I hope you found this
I
useful.
see.
Do you have any
Of
questions for
course.
me?
Uh, e- right now,
Hmm.
then tomorrow, as
Uh-huh.
a recap, tomorrow we will work on the ID, and then now we will like
You
do
will
the.
write a failing test now, and by tomorrow I'll find that failing test, I'll make it pass, and then we talk about the other, because the rest of that is stuff that we already talked about, like catching an ID, that's invalid. Everybody else watching us and following us on this channel already saw
Yeah.
us do that, right? The
All right.
new thing here is to pick up the exceptions that are coming from, so we get to introduce people to theory data and how we pass
Mm,
multiple levels of exceptions and
but
deal with
the
them.
only question is remaining: how we will like cast our the external type to the local type, because the fields are different and we have to like just do the
Oh yeah,
magic.
yeah, that's on the orchestration service
Uh-huh.
level. Don't worry
Uh-huh.
about that.
Okay.
That's for
Okay.
a different day. All right, guys.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mehdi. Thank you for joining me today. As usual, if you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, please feel free to drop a comment in the comment section. I'm glad that people are, taking advantage of this series around the standard. And please make sure you go to the engineering standard on GitHub. It's public. I should be able to publish the actual book very, very soon, within a couple of months. So take a look at it. It's provided with all code samples and the theory behind our engineering standard to make your life easier, and also at the same time to allow you to grow and know where to go next. With my friend Mahdi here, if don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll
Thank
see
you
you
for
tomorrow, man.
watching.
Yeah,
Thank you
take
for
care.
watching. Take care.